Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize about the cancellation of class today, but I did want to send you a recording of the material that you are supposed to have completed today. There is a quiz to go along with this as well. So this is a quick look at this week, a breakdown of what we're doing every day this week and what is due. So we do have quiz 3.02 due today. All right, so right before spring break, we were learning about solving perfect square equations. And so we took a look at equations that look like this, and we said since we're solving an equation, our goal is to get the x to be by itself. So anytime we have something like this x squared, we take the square root of both sides. So we took a look at some examples, and we had things like x squared equals 9, and we said, okay, just to get that x all by itself, we have to take the square root. One thing that we do have to keep in mind when we are taking the square root on both sides is that whatever our answer is has to be a plus or minus. So for instance, when we do a problem like this first one right here, when we take that square root on both sides, the square root of x squared would just leave us with x. And then when I take the square root of that 9 over there, I need to remember that that means that my answer will be a positive or it will be a negative. So we say it's plus or minus, and then the square root of 9 is 3. So then we took a look at ones like this. If we have other things besides just x squared, we get rid of those other things first. So in this problem, the first thing that we had to do was minus 10 on both sides. So we go over here, or excuse me, get rid of the minus 10 by adding 10. So we added 10 on this side, which meant we also had to add 10 on this side. So then when we did that, it just left us with x squared on the left-hand side. And when we have this x squared here, we are able to take the square root on both sides, but on the left side, or excuse me, the right side over here, we have a 58. So here we would end up square rooting both sides. We would square root the x squared and the 58, which left us with the square root of 58. We talked then about how when we had something like that, we had to simplify by seeing if there were any perfect squares that could go into that and clearing it that way. We did not have any that that would work in this particular example, so we just called this the square root of 58. All right. We looked at a few other, where did I go? We looked at a few other examples like this. We said we had to minus 16, and then we had to divide by 4 before we took the square root on both sides. And then one like this, we said, okay, when we have something like this, we've got this thing inside parentheses that's getting squared. So when we work our way from the outside in to solve this, we have the squared is the farthest thing from there, so that's what we have to get rid of first. So when we square root that left-hand side, that x plus 3 squared, we get rid of our square, which means we're just left here with an x plus 3 on this side. But then when I square root 25, I know that means that I have to have a plus or a minus 5 for taking that square root. So now when I have a problem like this, my x plus 3 equals plus or minus 5, going to solve this guy now, when I get rid of that plus 3, I have two numbers here. I have two numbers I have to remove my plus 3 from. I have a positive 5 and I have a negative 5. So when I go to get rid of it down here, I'm going to minus 3, but I'm going to minus 3 from my positive 5, and I have to minus 3 from my negative 5. So I would minus 3 on both of those, and so then that would leave me with an answer. On this side, I just have x. On the other side of my equal sign, I've got 5 minus 3, that's 2. Or for my other one, negative 5 minus 3, that's a negative 8. So we talked about how this answer was 2 or negative 8. So that's where we ended before spring break. So a few extra things that I just want to make sure that we know about for when you take your quiz. And that is, what if in our problem we had, this is basically the same one we just looked at, but the difference is now on this side of the equal sign we have a negative 25. So here I have to take the square root, but I'm taking the square root on both sides. Over here, this means of a negative 25. Now what we need to realize is when we take square roots, you cannot have a number that you're timesing by itself and it equals a negative. There is no number that I can times by itself to get negative 25. So since that number doesn't exist, what's that going to tell us about taking the square root of this number? Well, that wouldn't exist either. So we could not solve this. This is a problem that does not have a real answer. So we're going to say no real solution. So in other words, one thing that we have to make sure we realize is when we go to take the square root, which is what we said we have to do first in this one because that square root is the furthest away, we cannot take the square root of a negative, which is what we have over here. So no real solution. So these are just some extra practice problems. I highly recommend you pause right now, get these practiced, get out your notebook, work on some of these, and make sure that you're getting the hang of it. Once you've done those, one thing that's going to show up on your quiz is something that looks like this. So we haven't yet learned how to solve when we have one of these quadratic trinomials. But if you look, this is one of those special quadratic trinomials. Because when we go to factor this, this is a perfect square trinomial. And I know when I factor a perfect square trinomial, I'm going to have an x. I'm going to have whatever this sign is, which is a minus sign. And then I'm going to have the square root of this guy. The square root of 9 is 3. So that's going to be x minus 3. But then this x minus 3 here, I just take that and I write that is squared. So something we want to make sure that we are doing and paying attention to when we see something like this, it's a perfect square trinomial. And so this is very similar to those other problems that we were just looking at. If I want to solve this, I can take the square root on both sides, and that would just leave me with an x minus 3 on the left-hand side. And then when I take the square root of 49, that's going to leave me with a positive or a negative 7. So I'll have a positive 7 or a negative 7. So the last thing I would do to finish up this problem is I would say, okay, I have to add 3 to all sides. Can I do this? Add 3. How lined up are those? Add 3. Oh, it's decently close. Add 3 on both sides, but remember we have to do it to the negative 7 and to the positive 7. So that just leaves me with x equals on the left-hand side, and then 7 plus 3 is a positive 10. But then when I do negative 7 plus 3, that's going to give me a negative 4. So I once again end up with two solutions of a positive 10 or a negative 4. So again, here are some extra examples. I highly recommend that you pause and work these out to make sure that you are able to do these. So when you see it on your quiz, you can solve them correctly. All right, if you have any further questions on any of this, please let me know. Please send me an email, and I am hoping that we will have class tomorrow and everything will be back to normal then. So I look forward to seeing you guys then. I hope you had a wonderful spring break. And again, any questions, anything you're not sure about, send me an email. I will be checking my email.